Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Now. And yes, this is going to be a little different. I think from now on, I've gotten requests that, Ed, why don't you just show pictures of the missing person? We don't need to see you. I've got some comments like that, and I'm fine. Okay, great. We'll do it that way. I'll just do the audio like I usually do for the podcast that comes out every Friday, and then I will attach to this audio some pictures of the missing person. If there's a vehicle or a location or something that I can attach to the audio, that's what I'll do. Fine by me. I'm here to serve. So for this Unfound Now, coming out here at the end of November of 2023 into early December of 2023, going to be talking about the recent disappearance of Chelsea Grimm. She was last seen on September 28th, interestingly, by a police officer, and we have a video of her on badge cam. And then she was reported missing on October 4th, so 6 days after, 7 days after she was last seen. Her family finally reported that she was missing. She's a white female. She's 32 years old. And the plan for her was to drive from San Diego, way down there in the southwest United States, if you don't know where that is, if you're maybe a foreigner from some other country. And she was going to be, her plan was to drive to a wedding of a friend of hers in Connecticut, so in the Northeast. I mean, one of the longest drives you can make in what we would call the contiguous United States, the lower 48 that are all connected. This is like one of the longest drives you can make in the United States. And she was going to be doing that, but it seems something happened very early on in this trip. And I'm going to be doing, there is a map video that I want to show everybody. So I'm going to talk for a little bit. Then you're going to see a map in front of you, going to do a little diagramming, and I'll read the most recent article regarding Chelsea's disappearance, and I'll come back and getting to these learning points. You know me, I'm all about the education. So, and for every one of these Unfound Now since the beginning in summer of 2020, I have 3 learning points that I think we can take away from every disappearance. Always looking to learn more. And those 3 points are, number 1, planned or something else. Number 2, I'm your vehicle. And number 3, ourselves alone. So now you'll see a map on the video right there on the screen. I'm going to do a little diagramming. I'm going to read an article from, I think, a little over a month ago. And then I will come back to this microphone and I will get deeper into those 3 learning points. And by the way, while you're listening/watching, please give this video a thumbs up. Okay, let's take a look at this map. You can take a look at this map while I read an article from the middle of November, so a couple weeks ago, regarding Chelsea's disappearance. We have to remember that she started this trek on September 24th. The last time she was seen was on September 28th. And a missing persons report was filed on October 4th. So this article is written like 45 days, or maybe even longer than that, then after she has gone missing. And really, this is like the newest information. Not much has changed since the middle of November. I'm doing this video on November 30th of 2022. So 2 months after Chelsea Grimm embarked on a cross-country adventure, her family has no idea what happened to the artist and photographer who disappeared after saying she changed her mind and was planning to return home. Of course, the plan here was to go to a wedding. The 32-year-old left San Diego, so we see San Diego right down there in the bottom right-hand corner, on a cross-country trip on September 24th, headed to a wedding in Connecticut. And for all our non-American viewers, Connecticut is way, way up here, way where this cursor is, way up there, New Hampshire. It's above New York. And as I've heard many people say, you know, Unfound has listeners all over the world, and people who come to the United States for vacation or whatever, one of the things they're always amazed by is how large the United States is as a country, and all the different, of course, environments. We have mountains, we got high desert, we got Death Valley and everything else. And we have to remember how large the United States is. Not the largest country, but one of the largest. In contrast to if you're from France or England, Germany, Italy, those countries, as countries, they're more like states, United States. So it's way up there. It's a long drive for anybody who is a non-American. Way, way up there. So she was supposed to be going to this wedding, decided not to go, and she said she was planning to document the 2,800-mile road trip in photos, in kilometers. I don't know what that is. Her father said a spontaneous adventure like the trip was in character for his daughter. She was spontaneous. She changed her plans a lot. The magnitude of this adventure of driving across the country was a lot even for Chelsea. Originally, she planned to fly, but then she decided to drive to accommodate her pet bearded dragon, Roz. But 3 days into the trip, her parents said she called them and said she didn't think she could do the trip by herself. Chelsea planned to camp for a few days before returning home. She arrived in Phoenix, Arizona. So in 3 days, she only made it to Phoenix. So you can see on this, there's Phoenix or San Diego right there. There's Phoenix right there. I've actually made that drive. I actually had a job one time where I went down to San Diego for work, and then I had to drive over to Phoenix to the warehouse over there. So I've made this drive. It's no big deal. It's actually a very easy drive. You're out in the middle of nowhere. It's not very busy once you get outside of San Diego, but it is a little desolate. But pretty carefree driving. You don't have to worry about any deer or anything jumping out in front of you. Fairly easy drive. 5 hours maybe? So a 5-hour drive, and 3 days into it, she's only in Phoenix. It's a huge red flag. But she arrived in Phoenix where she met up with her sister who lives there and a friend. She was supposed to meet the same friend for lunch the following day, but canceled her plans and headed to Williams, Arizona. Williams is up here. You can see it right there, directly north by Sedona, which is a fairly well-known spot in Arizona. A lot of people go there to find it very peaceful, very unique place in the United States, kind of almost like a mystical or kind of has a certain mystique to it. I've never been there. Chelsea was stopped by a police officer responding to a call as she parked near a graveyard and war memorial. Body cam footage, and it's out there. You can watch it. I don't have rights to it, so I can't show it. Shows Chelsea having a conversation with the officer, asked if she was doing okay. I'm okay, Chelsea said. I was just doing a photo shoot of the lost soldiers, and I got a little emotional, so I was crying before I got back on the road. Chelsea assured the officer she didn't plan to stay there until sunset. The officer replied that she could stay however long she wanted and was good to go. This is very interesting to me. Why would she volunteer that she didn't plan to stay there until sunset when it wasn't any big deal? Why did she think that would be an issue? Her parents said Chelsea's response seemed to be in character for her. One thing that seemed very in the ordinary, very in character, was how she said, "I appreciate your compassion," or something like that. It sounded 110% like Chelsea. During the stop, the officer suggested some safe places for Chelsea to camp for the night. She was again seen by a woodcutter on September 30th, camping in her car near Ash Fork, Arizona. Let's just be clear about something. Camping in your car is otherwise known as living in your car. Chelsea told her parents she might not have cell service while she was camping, but when they didn't hear from her for several days, her parents reported her missing October 4th. So she goes up here. I don't know which route she takes. She ends up in Williams. And then her car was eventually found right over here where the red dot is in Ash Fork. I've been past Ash Fork in Williams. I don't think I've ever stopped there. I've been on the Route 40 many times, which goes through both those locations. A day later, a white Ford Focus SUV was found abandoned on the side of the road with 2 flat tires in Ash Fork. She seemed to have left that car in her own volition in an organized way. It was locked. She had taken her wallet, her phone, her sleeping bag, among other things, along with the bearded dragon. Authorities notified police in other states to be on the lookout for Chelsea. Her parents have also hired private investigator Kelly Townsend. I don't know if that's going to help or not. There were 2 flat tires. It was out in a dirt road. How far was the body cam video from where she talked to the police to where the car was found? Doesn't seem like it's very close. Did somebody interact with her and then drove down that road? The private investigator said her parents told News Nation they were hanging on the hope that someone would not recognize Chelsea and her pet bearded dragon. The chances of people recognizing Chelsea and sort of connecting the dots, if they see somebody with a bearded dragon, they're going to take that extra look at that person. Certainly anybody with a bearded dragon would certainly draw attention, in contrast to just having like walking their a beagle or miniature dachshund or something. So we just have to understand that, of course, Arizona is one of the lesser populated states. Phoenix, of course, is a major area. Tucson, and, up here around Kingman, certainly there's, it's been building up. But really otherwise, it's kind of a little bit desolate. And you get up here in the high desert. This is Ash Fork, is kind of south of the Grand Canyon. We can look at it with a satellite view, and it kind of just looks like how you'd expect. Just not one of those places where you want to break down and you'd lose cell service. But as I will point out when we get to the talking about the vehicle, the odds of two of your tires blowing out at one time so close to each other at the same time, it's practically like Super Bowl or Super Mega Millions or Powerball odds. That's how unlikely it is. So, and how did that happen? So that's where she was up here. You can zoom in on this. You can just tell. It's just rocks and sand and mountains, and that's it out there. Not someplace anybody should be unless you're really, really prepared. So that's this disappearance. I get into some of my insights about all this after this video. So thank you for watching, and I will go back to the microphone to to get into those learning points, and we'll complete this video. All right, and I am back to this microphone now to go over those three very important educational points for this particular episode. Before I move on, once again, please give this video a thumbs up. If you're not yet a subscriber to this channel, please consider doing so. If you'd like to support a little bit of monetary support to go along with what we do here, please hit the join button below this screen right there for $3 a month. You get some things that other people don't. Or you'd like to maybe support Unfound through patreon.com/Unfound podcast or paypal.me/Unfound podcast. All right, point number one, planned or something else. This is one of those topics where even over 7 years into doing Unfound, nobody has studied disappearances more than I have over the last 7 years. And I mean that. I live it. I do it 7 days a week. It's very common for me on Fridays, Saturday nights to be reading about missing persons cases, new ones, old ones, ones that have been solved. Very common. I have no social life. But on this topic of planned or something else, you can see why this is relevant because she said she was going to drive to Connecticut, but then she goes missing. And it's obvious from the article that something very early on happened. And so then we start thinking, was this the plan all along? She said she was going to be driving to Connecticut, but really this was just a way for her to get out of California because she had been thinking about, running away, committing suicide, living off the land or something like that. It was just the wedding story was just what she was telling everybody. I think this wedding existed. I think it occurred. Did she end up calling the couple and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be there? I haven't been able to find any information like that. That would be the nice thing to do. You say you're going to go to a wedding and you don't end up there, even though me with my, less than stellar when it comes to social things like that, wanting to attend and going to attend and then dropping out at the last minute because I'm really not into a lot of that stuff. Even I think I would let everybody know, you know what, even though I said I was going to be there, I'm not going to be there. Did she do that? I don't know. There's still something that I don't have a grasp on. These kinds of disappearances where the person says he or she, I'm going here, and then the person goes missing. And really, there's not a lot of reason to believe that along the way this person ran into a killer or something. Because with this disappearance here, it doesn't sound like she ran into anybody who harmed her. Maybe it happened. There's no facts to that, to support that at this point, doing this recording on November 30th of 2023. And another point was she was driving across the United States to a wedding, and she decided to take her pet bearded dragon. In fact, this is the reason she said that she didn't want to fly, so she could take this, is it a reptile, with her. You can't do that on a plane. I don't fly a lot, but I've seen a variety of animals, mainly, of course, dogs or cats. But you see, maybe a ferret or something like that. It's not that unusual these days. Would a pet bearded dragon not be able to go on a plane? What are the rules? I don't know. It seems like it would just be like any other animal. The flight's, 3.5 hours? So does that excuse or reason really fly? I don't know. So planned or something else, it's hard to say. Was this a planned disappearance, or did she really intend to go to Connecticut and just couldn't handle it? And I'll get into that in one of the other later points here. But we've covered some disappearances like this on Unfound. These are just some examples. We've actually covered many like this, but these are just a few. Jason Jolkowski, what I would call still the most mysterious disappearance that Unfound has ever covered. He went missing. He was supposed to get a ride from a coworker to work. Seemingly, allegedly, never made it to the car, which was waiting at the high school. But the reason this was happening is because Jason's own car was in the shop. Something had happened to it. So do you think that Jason still goes missing if nothing goes wrong with his car? Probably not, but it very well may be that it was something in Jason's head like, you know what, I feel like getting out of here. And the car, something happened to it, just got in the way of his original plan, so he devised another plan. Just an idea. Devin Brown Busetta, she had just recently moved from Florida to Pittsburgh. Does she still go missing if she doesn't move to Pittsburgh, where she hardly knew anybody? And then Trevor Nichols, he was a guy, he was stationed in New York in the Army, and he was getting transferred to Kansas, and somewhere within all of that, he went missing. He's still missing, and of course, Jason and Devin are still missing as well. Does he go missing if this transfer doesn't happen, if that paperwork doesn't occur? And for all of these, usually I'm pretty solid on my theories for all three of these. I really don't know what to say. I mean, I have a theory, but it's not very strong. So, and these are good examples because in none of these is foul play obvious. And they're good examples because all three of these people could have caused their own disappearances. So we just have no good solid answers on disappearances like this one we're talking about with Chelsea Grimm. All right, let's move on to learning point number 2. And that is, I'm Your Vehicle. And if you know that song, that is a song like a one-hit wonder by the Ides of March. Talk a lot about cars and vehicles, maybe sometimes boats. For example, the Pickering 6 or the Marco Island 3, Flight 370. Vehicles can play very, very prominent parts in disappearances, even for the episode that's coming out here on December 1st for the disappearance of Pauline Diaz. her truck while it was where it was parked and what was inside of it and how far it was from her strange husband's house. Huge importance for all of that. So we have Chelsea's car, and it seems like it was out in the middle of nowhere, kind of what we would call northern Arizona. And 2 of its tires are flat. Not 1, but 2. You have to understand the odds of you driving anywhere for an extended period of time, whether you're driving across the United States, driving across Europe, driving from the top to the bottom of Africa, or across Asia, whatever else, the odds of 2 of your tires blowing out, unless you really, really, really don't take care of your car, is so unlikely. Even, just for your average car on the streets today, for just even 1 tire to blow is fairly unlikely. So for 2 to blow, it's almost unheard of. So what then are we thinking? How do 2 tires get blown out on a car? I'd have to say it would have to have been on purpose. We don't know who that would be. Maybe Chelsea did it. Maybe she parked the car there and it was fine, and some vandal came along and took out 2 of the tires. But you just have to understand this is fairly rare. Even if it were 1 tire, it would be odd. A woman, where the car was found, 1 tire being flat, what are the odds of that? Not very likely. 2 is just so unheard of. And of course, given that this seems to be out in the middle of nowhere, what are the odds that vandalism occurred? Now, there was that disappearance. I don't have it in my notes, but we did. It was an Unfound now from a couple years ago. The woman in California who went from northern to southern California to Joshua Tree area. Now, her car ended up being vandalized, but even that is probably a little more traveled area than where Chelsea was. And a lot of people were thinking, well, she got into trouble and she got carjacked and somebody destroyed the vehicle. This woman from California, this former missing person covered on a previous Unfound now, she was found deceased. I don't think anybody thinks that there was foul play. I think she was going through something. Maybe what Chelsea Grimm was going through, and I'll get into that in the next part ourselves alone. But does anybody know exactly what the condition of the car was before she left? Now, I know that there's a stereotype out there. Well, men take care of their cars better than women do. My experience, I'm not so sure that's true. I have a lot of guy friends who are not into cars, don't take care of their vehicles, even go way back to when I was a teenager, 40 years ago. That's just as common as it is with women. In fact, it very well may be the opposite. Maybe because just generally women aren't into cars as much as men are and into mechanical stuff. It's just a stereotype. I know a lot of great women, drag racers, car racers, mechanics out there. I know that. But it very well may be the opposite, because maybe some women, realize, what, I really don't understand about cars. They may overdo maintenance on their vehicles. They're really, really, really up on their maintenance of their vehicles to maybe spending too much money on maintenance of their vehicles. Where guys, I know everything about a car and I can fix it if it breaks. And what they eventually do is just let the car fall apart. So we have to think about that. So we'd have to know, we just can't say because Chelsea was a woman that the car wasn't in great shape. It might have been in perfect shape. We don't know, but it would be helpful if we knew this. What was the gas situation? We don't know. Now, like I said, we've covered so many disappearances, I can't even begin to tell you how many we've covered where cars played a very relevant part. This is just a very small list, and I picked this list just because of the variety of them. We have Milda McQuillan, who went missing in the 1970s. Her vehicle was found on a logging road that I think a lot of people didn't even know existed. She wasn't even from the area. Somehow her car ended up on this logging road. That's a disappearance that's almost 50 years old. It's still unsolved. Some people believe there was foul play. I don't know if I'm convinced of that. I don't think I am. But I will tell you that the guest for that episode, his name was Joe Kistner, great guy, great guest. He leans very much toward the idea that something of a foul play nature happened to Milton McQuillan. Rebecca Lancaster, disappearance I covered maybe in the second year of Unfound. She was on video. She was seen on her car, and then her car was found the next day out on, once again, some type of logging road. Was it in Alabama or Mississippi, out in the middle of nowhere, and all sorts of things in her car were strewn around the vehicle. It's believed that foul play happened there. She had a drug problem. Did she run into this guy that was kind of a drug dealer for her? No proof of that, but maybe. So her car played a prominent part. And then we had David Hardy, who went missing, and he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and his family never took the keys away from him. And so he's just driving around, getting lost, being brought back home, getting his car, and the car ended up being abandoned in some subdivision. What was it? Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, somewhere in there. And he's still missing. So we have a variety of situations that you can run into when we start talking about cars. Then, of course, we've covered disappearances where the person and the person's car went missing, which is all maybe a whole different type of disappearance. But you really have to take a look at these things. The problem we have with Chelsea's is we don't know as much as we would normally know. When we cover a disappearance like this on Unfound, a disappearance that's several years old, and we can really get into the details of the car. With the newer disappearance like this, just not as much information available at this time. But with the two tires being flat, it'd be hard for me to believe that this was some sort of road problem that caused these tires to go flat. I'd have to believe that somebody caused them to go flat. And we just might at this point have to consider that Chelsea did that. Why? I don't know. And the final topic for this Unfound Now episode is ourselves alone. And what this means is, where do our minds go when we don't have a lot of stimuli going on? We're just out there riding. Of course, we can use Spotify for music and Sirius XM radio. And unfortunately, people even watch YouTube videos while they're driving, which doesn't sound like the safest thing ever. And of course, she had her pet with her. But still, does that take up enough of your brain that your mind doesn't start wandering places? And I know, having done a lot of driving in my life, I've driven across the United States 3 times. And I've driven back and forth to Pennsylvania many times. I've drove to Illinois, then to Pennsylvania, and back to Florida in the summer of 2022. I drove to West Texas, Amarillo back in 2019, and back a very long drive, 25 hours, something like that, one way. And I'll tell you what, even though I love driving, and as long as I'm not tired, I love being out on some highway at like 3 in the morning and just the tunes going. Like I said, as long as I'm not sleepy, that is totally my vibe. But if you're not into that, I can see how a lot of people get creeped out. And they can get paranoid, and you're just the only car out there. And then on top of that, if you do have insecurities about maybe driving across the United States or driving long distances, you start worrying about your car. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Things can go bad very quickly. Driving 18-wheelers across the United States, transportation, is not for everybody. But for me, I'm used to it because I've been single most of my life. It's not unusual for me. I live alone. I work alone. I work from home. So I have a lot of time, just me and my thoughts. And you got to be pretty solid with your mental health to be like that. Humans are social creatures. I don't know if I am, but in general, people love to get out and be around others and throw around jokes and go to parties. And that's why, hobbies are so important or so common in fraternities and sororities and all of those things. So when you're just by yourself in a car, that's the opposite of that. But it is a fantastic test of mental health. Can you drive a very, very long distance and do it and not drive yourself nuts with whatever is up in your head? Can you live with your own thoughts, or do you need outside stimuli to keep from going insane? There's another component to this, and that is a lot of people, when they know they're going to be driving long distances, they may start looking into doing some drugs. I'm not saying hardcore drugs like heroin or anything, but they may be looking into some sort of speed or something to make sure that they don't fall asleep and that they can make it the whole way and that they don't have to pull over to the side of the road and sleep in some rest area, which could be dangerous. Well, those drugs don't help. They don't help when it comes to your mental health. So this is something else to consider. Could Chelsea have done this? I think it's something you need to think about. We just don't know a lot about her background. It's not a lot of that is available. Now, we have covered a disappearance right here on Unfound Now like that, and that was Caitlin Rowe's case. Remember that? She was driving from Louisiana to Colorado, and her car was found somewhere right around Oklahoma. And unfortunately, very recently, her remains were found not far from where her car was located. It's maybe last year, maybe 2022. Kind of the same thing. It seemed like she was driving around a little bit just like Chelsea was. We had a disappearance on the podcast, Randy Duran, who wasn't driving across the United States, but I think he was taking a bus or hitchhiking. He was supposed to be going to Florida. He made it as far as New Orleans and disappeared. Sent a postcard to his family. This was in New Orleans, and that was that. And then more recently, this disappearance, I guess, has been resolved as well. Andrew Griffin, this was a disappearance, an unfound now disappearance from the end of August, early September. He went missing during the summer of 2023. He was driving from Oklahoma to Texas and called somebody. He said he was like over a river or something, and he never made it to his work. Well, it just turned out, as I just talked about in the most recent live show, I found some news. I was told by somebody, and then I found the news myself, that they arrested him as he was stepping off a plane as he was coming back from Honduras. And he's now in jail for domestic abuse and kidnapping, which is, go back and listen to that episode. I don't think you could predict any of that when he went missing during the summer of 2023. So, the outcomes, my experience with these type of outcomes, especially since it's been like almost 2 months since Chelsea went missing, that maybe this is not going to be a situation where she ends up alive. But these disappearances, as I just stated with like Andrew Griffin, maybe they're a little more unpredictable than our perception tells us. So, when it comes to ourselves and our minds and getting out there and having to drive somewhere long distance, and you know that you're not going to be able to make it in one day, and you're going to have to sleep somewhere, and you're going to have to make arrangements or sleep in a rest area and worry about a pet or something like that, that's a lot of stress. That has to be considered when thinking about the mindset of Chelsea Grimm. I will tell you, my experience tells me that my best guess is I don't think that she ever had any intention, of going to this wedding. To drive across the United States for your average person, your average 45-year-old, healthy, decent mind, and decently likes to drive is probably, 3 days. I will tell you, I drove from Pittsburgh to Las Vegas once in 31 hours. And San Diego is 4 more hours from Las Vegas, and Connecticut is probably 8 more hours from Pittsburgh, something like that. So that's an additional 12 hours. So it's a 43-hour drive, but what? How long do you want to drive? 12 hours a day or something. So 13 hours a day. So like I said, about 3 days. Like I said, I would probably be able to do it in 2 days, given that many hours. But I'm unique. But in 3 days, she was only in Arizona. I just think that at some point something was going on with her, and I think this was just an excuse for her to get out of California without anybody really questioning what she was doing. Because we also have to remember she said that she was having problems and she was going to come home. Well, she didn't do that either. So not only did she not go to Connecticut, she didn't go back to San Diego, and that was only a few hours away. So I got to lean toward the idea, even though, like I said, just it's one of those kinds of disappearances where a lot of different things are possible, but it just seems to me that this was kind of planned. I'm not saying she wanted to commit suicide or anything, but maybe she just needed an excuse to get away and didn't have any of the strength to tell anybody that who was around her, and was just telling people what they wanted to hear. And maybe something went bad after this. I just don't see at this point any reason to think foul play. But it very well may be that driving alone, being alone, maybe she did take some uppers or something. Just put her in a very, very bad place. It's common. People are taking off like this all the time. All the time. It's very sad. But that's the best I can do for Chelsea's disappearance. I think there's still a hope to believe she's out there somewhere, but would certainly like to hear the conditions in which she is found alive and where she's been all this time, from northern, Arizona. It's not the first place you'd pick if your car has 2 flat tires. So that's this episode of Unfound Now. Thank you for listening. It's the best I can do with the information that is out there. And please give this video a thumbs up. Please like this channel. Please share this video. And I will talk to you again next month.